So I need a little bit of audience participation. So I just want to know, how many of you work from home, even just occasionally? Yay, okay. So hands up, still keep up. How many of you feel productive when you work from home? Feel like you could really focus better? Okay, great. How about, for all of you, who feels like a good work-life balance makes you a better worker, a good worker? Any hands up? Oh, great. Oh, most of you. Well, I'm sorry to say this isn't what a lot of businessmen think, right? An aberration, lazy gets, not my words, that is, morally wrong. These are just some of the words that have been used to talk about remote workers. Actually, the problem of productivity and commitment of remote workers are the reasons why a lot of companies are asking workers back into the office 5 days a week, completely eliminating the opportunities to work from home. This is based on what we call the flexibility stigma. The idea that somehow flexible workers, remote workers, are less committed, motivated, and therefore less productive than in-office workers. Unfortunately, this isn't just business leaders that have these ideas. Heejung Chung and I looked at the Eurobarometer of 2018, and we saw that 1 out of 3 workers in Europe felt that flexible working was viewed negatively by colleagues, and it led to negative career outcomes. Obviously, there are variations. So you have about 10% in countries like Finland, but in countries like Greece and Luxembourg, that's up to 50%. Now, you might think, oh, come on, Heejung, that was 2018. Nobody was working remotely. But now, after the pandemic, everybody is. Surely no one's being stigmatized now, right? So Yvonne Lott, Sen-Hu Wang, and I conducted a vignette study. So vignette study, we give you a hypothetical worker, say, oh, Charlotte Davis, she's 35, mom of 2 children, and we differ here, she works from home, from the office 5 days a week, or a couple of days from home, or 3-4 days from home. And then we asked, oh, what do you think about Charlotte's commitment, motivation? How productive is she? And would you promote Charlotte for this promotion? And these vignettes are great because sometimes, even yourselves, we might not even know that we have these biases. It's hidden. Or you might not want to tell me you have those biases, right? So it's really good to capture these thoughts. What we find is that in both UK and Germany, that those who worked from home were evaluated negatively, having control for all other characteristics. I'm talking gender, age, parental status, yada, yada. And this is especially true for those who worked more days from home, the 3 to 4 days compared to the couple of days, 1 or 2 days. Then the question is, why do we think in this way? Why do we think that remote workers, for the lack of better words, slackers? And I want to say that rather than being based on scientific evidence of some sort, that this is based on our norms or ideas around work and gender roles. And this is precisely these problematic natures of the way we think about work and gender that prohibits us from really adopting good working practices that could not only help workers and their families, but also companies and society as a whole. Now first, what's the real evidence behind remote working? First up, happiness commitment. This is easy. Remote workers are happier, they're more committed and motivated. And the reason for this is because, we all want to work remotely. Most of us want to work flexibly. So if companies give us that coveted arrangement, what do? We're happy, we're motivated. And we want to stay in that company and we want to give back. And this is also why we see that those companies have fewer problems with retention and recruitment. Also because remote working, flexible working allows for better work-family integration, and that's why we see that remote workers, flexible workers can have better work-life balance, well-being outcomes, reduce sickness and absenteeism. Now, reduce sickness, absenteeism, enhance commitment, motivation, these things alone can help enhance productivity, right? But add the fact that with home working, you could reduce commuting times, which could, for some of us, could be up to 3 to 4 hours a day. And the fact that for a lot of us, actually remote working, working from home helps us focus, concentrate without the distraction of the office. This is why we see in surveys of workers, surveys of managers, but also field experiments where we use really objective measures of productivity, that remote workers are as productive, if not more productive than in-office workers. In my own book, The Flexibility Paradox, I outline how flexible workers tend to work harder and they tend to work longer than those who do not work flexibly. In fact, we see that remote workers tend to think about work when not at work, and this might be for some of you as well. And we also work during our free time. So we have remote workers actually have work encroaching on our private or family time rather than the other way around. But then why do we think remote workers are slackers or lazy? One reason is the proximity bias, and this is where managers tend to think that those they can see more often are those that are actually working, right? So this is a bit of a problem. Like, ew, if Charlotte's working from home, is she even working? So because those remote workers are not as visible compared to workers who come into the office, especially if your co-workers or managers are coming in, this is why they experience that bias. But more importantly, this has to do with how we think about a good productive worker. So what image comes to your head when you think about, ooh, a really motivated worker? Unfortunately, in today's society, we still have an image where this person could really devote themselves to work and only to work, right? They have no other responsibilities outside of work. They have no friends, no family. They don't even have their own body that they need to take care of. They could just really work long hours in the office. And this ideal type was kind of based on the 1950s male breadwinner, right? And he could do that a bit, because why? He had a female caregiver, a wife who did his cooking, his cleaning, the child care, the dog care. She even took care of himself. Like she did his GP appointments, dentist appointments, make sure that he's, has good well-being, etc. This ideal image doesn't really fit with modern-day work, right? Or modern-day workers. It's extremely exclusionary to people who have other responsibilities outside of work. It means like caring responsibilities, so women, mothers, or any kind of informal caring responsibilities. And also for those who have self-caring responsibilities, and I mean disabled workers, workers with long-term illnesses, fluctuating illnesses. Actually, this image doesn't even fit with modern-day men, because men also have caring responsibilities and responsibilities outside of work. It may be for their family or the larger community. More importantly, this ideal worker image is outdated. It's kind of based on Taylorist ideas of industry, or machine-based work, where the input in somehow is seen as output. And we know that that's now how it works in today's knowledge-based economy. Increasingly, we know that shorter hours are more productive. One, because long hours leads to negative outcomes for workers' well-being and burnout, but also, we know that when you work extremely long hours, you make mistakes, you're fatigued, you can't focus, to the point where very long hours results in negative productivity. So you actually undo a lot of the productivity you had in the early hours of work. More importantly, we find that studies show that mental and physical detachment away from work is really important, which we can't do with long hours work. Like all other muscles, the brain actually needs time for rest and recovery if we want peak performance. But despite being outdated, the ideal worker reinforces this flexibility stigma, and it does it in various ways. One is by promoting the idea that you can't have a good work-life balance and be a productive worker. That being able to meet or having to meet family demands, yeah, you're not going to be a very good worker. And it also is about biases against women and mothers, right? Because in the 1950s model, as I mentioned, mothers, like myself, we're supposed to be at home taking care of kids. So you can't possibly be a mom, and a good mom, and be a good worker. You can't possibly be a mom and live up to the ideal worker status. So kind of going back to our study, the vignette study, We wanted to see if there were organizational context in which we could introduce to reduce the stigma and bias against remote workers. And we found it. So if we say, oh, all workers are remote working and it's for everyone, that's when remote working bias was reduced. Not eliminated, not yet, but reduced. But we found that when remote working was associated with mothers, it's mothers using it. Most mothers are working remotely. This is when the bias was strongest. So this leads us to believe that it isn't remote working per se that's the problem. It is when remote working is seen as a mother's policy. When it's seen as something mothers do, that's when we really start stigmatizing remote workers. And that's where the bias comes from. And we've seen this happen before, and this is part-time work. So there's nothing innately wrong with part-time work, right? Part-time workers are actually more productive per hour compared to full-time workers in many cases. However, because part-time work is seen as a mother's employment, a mother's policy, this is why we penalize part-time workers and they experience negative career outcomes. And now we're seeing this happen with remote working. Now, this is a real problem with the whole RTO, return to office mandate, because we're seeing men return back into the office more quickly. And this is for two reasons. One is because they can. They don't have as much responsibility for childcare and housework, right? So they can go back. But also, in most heterosexual families, men are the main breadwinner, so any negative career outcomes feels more consequential. So they're going back. Whereas mothers, because they're still the ones that bearing the brunt of housework and childcare, they're less able to go back. And if they're asked to go back into the office 5 days a week, they might have to drop out of the labor market altogether or move into, career-ending part-time jobs. When we see more women, especially mothers, stay remote working, whereas men and fathers go back into the office, we're going to see an exacerbation of this bias against remote workers. And not just for the mothers, but for any remote workers. We will end up in a society where we see a lot of workers go back into the office, and not because they want to go back or because it's more productive to go back, but just because they're afraid of the negative career outcomes they may face. But let me just not in a gloomy note here. Going back to our cross-national studies, we found that like Finland and other countries, there are countries where this bias doesn't exist, right? So there are ways to tackle it. And we found that there are certain countries where these biases don't exist, and those are where remote working is normalized, flexible working is normalized, workers have stronger rights, there's kind of protection against discrimination, gender norms are egalitarian, and work-life balance is seen as a norm not just for mothers, but for all genders. And remote working policies are seen as a smart working, performance-enhancing policy rather than just a work-life balance policy. Just to sum up, so there is a very concerted effort made by certain businessmen and tech bros that want to push an image of what a good worker looks like. They say, you can't be a good worker while working remotely. You can't have good work-life balance and be a devoted worker, right? But what I want to say is those ideas, those thoughts, they're not based on any scientific evidence. Rather, they're based on problematic, but also very antiquated ideas about work and gender roles. I'm not going to be able to change those guys' minds. That's not going to happen. They're very set on pushing this biased views. But what I can do is persuade you. And I'm going to urge you to listen to science. You know that feeling when you think, oh, I'm actually really productive when I'm working from home? Oh, a good work-life balance makes me a better worker, a motivated worker. Now that feeling is backed by science. So what I want you to do is to trust yourself and fight back. You're going to be a little army now. I want you to fight back. I want you to fight back against people who are spreading the flexibility bias. I want you to fight back to the managers and companies who are asking workers to come back into the office 5 days a week. I want you to argue that we need to stop being swayed by this rhetoric and ideas about work and gender roles that are almost dating 100 years ago, and start really listening to scientific evidence about what really works. Because when we do, we could actually design a workplace that works better for their workers and families, but also companies and society as a whole. Good luck. Thanks.